Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to present my case against Legion's legendary item system. As you can tell by the title, I'm not particularly a fan, but that isn't to say that there are not good elements that could work if repackaged in a different way, and I will cover that towards the end. First, a quick refresher on these legendaries. They are, for the most part, random world drops. Additionally, they have text effects which integrate class mechanics into the items, and their item level is above that of the current raid tier. It would seem significantly so based on Blizzard's current communication. Each class will also have access to multiple legendary items. However, Blizzard have recently pulled back a little bit from the announced system, saying that they will initially be inactive for mythic content, and that at the start of an expansion, players will only be able to equip one of them on their character. As the expansion goes on, the number of legendaries that a player will be able to equip is set to increase. Certainly, they are positive changes. However, I think there are overall a number of problems, and I'm going to save the raid-related ones towards the end, because that's really all that people talk about. There are broader game design issues at play here. First of all, getting a legendary item will remove a gear slot from your progression. If you get one of these items, you'll be able to equip it and then completely forget about that slot. One criticism of the heirloom item system is that they remove gear progression from leveling. In Legion, this will cause a similar problem. If you get a legendary helm, it will be a higher item level than the current raid tier, and it will have a special effect. Essentially, you won't need to worry about helms again, likely for much, if not all, of the expansion. Getting lucky once removes progression from your character and cuts out long-term gameplay. When a new tier of content comes out, you will have less to earn. Additionally, you will have less possible progression within any given tier. As an example, in Warlords of Draenor, you really only had one ring slot because the legendary was just always used if that was a given. In Siege of Orgrimmar, you never had progress for your cape slot. Now, while you will only be able to equip a single legendary item, you will be able to own multiple. Say you have a legendary helm and a legendary necklace. You equip the helm. You know that any necklace that you earn will be replaced as soon as Blizzard flips the switch on allowing more than one legendary item to be equipped. The excitement from the normal gameplay loop of gearing is therefore reduced. It's diminished, it's less fun. Further to that, there is what I'm going to be calling the Ferrari problem. So if somebody works their whole life and they buy a Ferrari or a fancy car, a special item, a Rolex, whatever the hell floats their boat, that's a special item. But if somebody just gets fancy cars all the time, and they see all their friends rolling around in fancy cars, then fancy cars become less interesting because it's not a fancy car if it's common and perhaps the default. Let's be honest, just about every character is going to have one of these legendary items, and the same principle of these fancy cars applies to the legendary items within Legion. Sure, your first one is going to be dead exciting, but past that, they're going to be par for the course. The game design benefit of their existence, in this case, is a one-shot wonder. Blizzard will blow their load and it will not be particularly useful afterwards. Additionally, I am also concerned about the effect that it's going to have on the game's world content. World content is generally designed for a newish max level character. By the time you get some decent gear, the world content becomes extremely irrelevant. It's a bit brain dead. There's no gameplay there because you crush everything. With this legendary system, in addition to how gear is handled these days, which I will cover in a bit, this effect will be compounded, and balancing world content to be interesting to a vast array of players is going to be even harder. Also, when designing loot, it is vital to envision the gameplay that the loot will drive. We know that these are going to be based off the idea of traditional world drops and that they will be random. However, you will be able to a degree, target what you get. I think in all likelihood, one area will have a higher chance of dropping a particular one. Realistically, this is going to lead to farm groups with personal loot, spending hours upon hours grinding down mobs in the hope of a drop. I don't think this is the kind of gameplay that they should be encouraging. Another issue is the power delta between players at endgame. Blizzard seem to be continuing with their idea of Diablo-ified loot and large power increases between tiers. This legendary system is another factor to throw on the top of the pile of things which make a new max level character magnitudes weaker in terms of their throughput. In order to bridge this gap, Blizzard are then forced to implement catch-up systems which then gut the progression gameplay from World of Warcraft. Alt catch-up is actually a similar problem. These are rare items with a low drop chance. Over time, players will be able to equip multiple legendary items, so by the time that we are on the second tier, mains will have grinded out their legendary items, but any new alts will have a large gap to close in terms of their power. Traditionally, this could be closed via a currency system and decently dependable gear drops. Now this will be closed by grinding out a very rare drop, and if they do add a catch-up system to these legendary items, then it betrays the entire point of their existence. On the raid front, we do see a problem with spectacle creep in terms of Blizzard's game design. Since Throne of Thunder, we have seen increasingly mental trinkets which bring extreme power. The difference between having one of these and not having one of these is drastic. For an example, take a level 100 player with a 720 item level who has no class trinkets or a legendary ring, and then compare them to a character with class trinkets and with a legendary ring. Even if they have the same item level, the power difference is simply astounding. This legendary system will further add to that, and this is going to create a number of social problems as the expansion continues. It will also lead to problems with encounter design, as we have seen with Hellfire Citadel. Additionally, in terms of loot acquisition throughout the expansion, this includes within raids, within challenge mode dungeons. It makes the best in slot list something that's honestly a little bit silly and makes everything else, well, pale in comparison to that, which I don't think is going to be exciting to players. Now, the benefit of these is that it can be pretty damn cool the first time you get one, just like the world drops of old. Well, we can have a system like that. I just don't see why they need to make them so powerful. Often you find Blizzard have a good idea, but then they go too far with it. They don't apply the nuance that perhaps it requires. I would have a focus on these world drop items, as Legion does have more of a focus on world content. I would make them exciting items with their own bits of quest content, like a miniature Keldalar, which many of you who played during Wrath of the Lich King will surely remember. They would be a great leg up for players who want to get into a raid, and maybe if you had some raid gear, they'd be a nice little upgrade, but they wouldn't eclipse all other forms of content. They would be unique models that people would also pursue for transmogging reasons, so they have relevance to a broad slice of the World of Warcraft playing community. Overall, I think this would deliver better quality content to players in a way that is decoupled from the rest of the game, in that they do not basically leapfrog all the other gear within a given raid tier. It could be its own thing that delivers excellent content without creating a myriad of issues. Why go with the thing that is artificially pumped up that creates lots of problems in the future when you can just get it right from the get-go? Often Blizzard seem to design loot as a carrot and then they think about the content later. It seems like a data-driven methodology to increase retention rather than a game design that is inspired by the desire to deliver fun. The cool loot should be the cherry on top of content, not the entire fucking cake. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm really keen to see what you have to say on the topic. So hit me up on Twitter, leave it down in the comments. I will be reading all of them. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.